to say? We're on. Hey everybody, we're live. We're live on Backstreet's Instagram. Listen, I'm just going to do one little test here so I can make sure I see what's going on. Anyway, so we're here, and glad you're here too. Thanks for stopping by. As we all know, these are different times right now, and we're hoping to be on the road at this time, but we're not. We'll hopefully be back out in the fall, but we thought we'd take advantage of what we were calling the new normal, get a chance to talk to everybody, and kind of looking forward to spending some time with you today. I want to thank, of course, Chris Phillips and Backstreets for making this all possible. So here we are. Anyway, so May 9th, 1974, historic concert happened here locally in Cambridge. We're going to talk about that, but we're going to go back a little bit, talk about 1974. Yep, 1974. Let me just find a picture here. Sorry, folks, I was stuck here. All right, 1974. I was living in Boston, and I was kind of fortunate because I was kind of found myself embedded in the music business. Now, what I mean by that is I had got to know a few people. That's me, 1974, trying desperately to look cool. Anyway, I had grown up with music. Music was always in my house, and it was great to be around music all the time. When I was in college, I was a disc jockey. After college, I was actually a roadie for a couple of years, and I just somehow found myself embedded in the world of music, getting to meet other musicians, people in production, recording studios, management. It was just a fun time. Boston was an incredible time to be in the music business and also to be in music. Incredible things were happening. WBCN, our radio station, we used to go down to the Boston Tea Party and see concerts. This will give you an example of what we see. My producer, Marty, is showing you an image. At the Boston Tea Party, you could go see The Who one week, Led Zeppelin another week, Jeff another week, all for $3, Jeff Beck another week, all for $3. It was an incredible time. Thank you, Marty. Anyway, Homespun Productions here. Anyway, so it was just a great time to be there. Now, I was lucky. I happened to meet some individuals who were involved with music. Names are Ira Gold and Jeff Hirsch. They were Bonnie Raitt's managers. And Bonnie Raitt was a popular artist in the area at the time. And I was very fortunate to start doing some work with them, photographing her. This is a shot that I took of Bonnie in 1974. And I kind of like showing this off because it was during rehearsal. And one of the things that was interesting was Dick Waterman, great photographer himself, loved the photo, tried to make it become an album cover, just wouldn't reproduce right from Warner Brothers. These days, things would be different. But anyway, through them, I started photographing their concerts. One of the acts that I photographed in Cambridge was Van Morrison, who lived in Cambridge for a while. Another artist I happened to photograph at the time, who actually was out in California, was Patti Smith. And this is some really early Patti Smith material. She actually was performing at the boarding house. The album Horses was just about to be released, and it was an incredible opportunity to get a chance to photograph this incredible artist. But it was, a time where I would say there was a sort of casualness in the atmosphere. We would go to music events, we would go to concerts, the next day we talked about who we saw, we listened to the radio. Music was a part of our lives. I joke about how then, when we shared music, we actually physically gave somebody an album, and we hoped that we'd ever get the album back. But anyway, there was a comfort level in concerts at the time. We had easy access to the stage, to the backstage areas. We were allowed to basically, do kind of what we want to get the pictures. The artists kind of embraced us on stage. I always felt that myself as a photographer, the people there were lighting technicians, the stage hands, we were all a part of this kind of flourish of art and activity that we were excited to be part of, and we didn't know where it was all going. We just were experiencing it all together, ourselves and the artists. I had great access to everything. One of the artists that I happened to photograph one time was Boz Scaggs. Now here he is in the dressing room, really very luxurious backstage, as you can see. That's actually Jeff Hirsch over there. Jeff was Bonnie's business manager, worked with her for many, many years afterwards with Dick Waterman. They put on some great acts. Jeff used to bring in the big names, and Ira Gold, the partner, was the one that always used to look for kind of new and upcoming acts that opened up. It was a great pair of people to work with. Here's a shot of Jackson Browne from those times during Soundcheck. I happen to really love this shot. I love the dark and light look of it, you know. But when I came across this shot, one of the things that was really fascinating to me is later on, when I was looking through my collection of work, I came across another shot of Jackson on stage. And here he is on stage playing. Now, this will be kind of fun. If you notice, in this shot, he's wearing a black shirt. In this shirt, he's wearing a white shirt. And I realized some years later, I was standing next to the bass player on stage, literally during the live performance, photographing the show. That's something you just don't see this time. Though occasionally, I admit, I see Danny behind the stage taking a shot or two. But anyway, that type of access on stage during a show was very, very unique. Now, in 1974, at the time, Bruce Springsteen was playing locally. He was still relatively an unknown act. Locally, he had a following. He had a following on the East Coast, some states around the country as well. But he was up and down the East Coast playing alls, and he played in Boston a lot. He was starting to get a little bit of a following, and here's an ad from one of his local shows at Joe's, and as you can see, they didn't even know how to spell his name right at the time. This is certainly an up-and-coming person, you know? Anyway, a friend of mine, a fellow named Lee, who was actually an old friend from high school and a roommate at the time, had brought home Bruce's first 2 albums. And one of the things he said, I heard this guy's pretty good. So we thought, let's go check him out. Now, he was playing locally at Joe's Place, another place called Charlie's Place in town. We went to see him at Charlie's Place in Cambridge. And I remember saying to myself after we saw him, and I remember they were played in a tiny bar. The band members, 6 of them, crammed in a space maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The place was like, you know, pretty packed. We sat down, we were in a booth, one of those like hard wooden back booths with some beers, and people were sitting in front of us. And I look at this guy and I look around, and I say to myself, well, this place is pretty crowded. He looks at me, he says, well, you've never heard him before? I said, not live. He goes, oh, wait, I'm from Philadelphia and I've been following this guy up and down the coast. My first reaction was, why on earth would anybody do that? But anyway, what happened next was Bruce and the E Street Band played, I think, 2 or 3 sets that night. I left the bar that night saying to myself 2 things. That is the most amazing rock and roll music I ever heard in my life. And 2, I gotta see this guy again. So what I did is I called my friend Ira. Ira came over, I said, Ira, you got to book this guy to show. I want to see him again. You just got to book him. Ira came over. We played a couple of the albums for him. He got excited. He brought it to his partner Jeff. Jeff and Ira went that night to meet Bruce at the bar. They offered him to open up for Bonnie Raitt on May 9th. Now the interesting thing was Bonnie's show that was scheduled for May 9th was not going to have any opening acts. They, being Bonnie's manager, wanted to really give her a spotlight. She had been on the road mostly as an opening act, opening for Jackson a lot. And they figured, it's her hometown, let's give her her own night. So the idea of adding Bruce as the opening act became a real last minute thing to do. Anyway, so what happened as a result of that was this. Bonnie opened up for Bruce at May 9th, 1974 at the Harvard Square Theater, and you can go see him for $4. Pretty good, huh? Anyway, I was excited about going to see the band that night. I remember putting aside some seats to some friends of mine, kind of telling them, you won't believe what you're about to hear. And I knew that the evening was going to be mostly Bonnie's, but it's going to be very exciting for me to basically share my love of this artist with new friends and also see how other people react to it. So anyway, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that was fun to have access to was the access to the stage during Soundcheck. And I would roam around, take pictures, get a feel for it. Now, most times, Soundcheck is a real casual thing. Band comes in, plays a couple of bars, they check the onstage monitors, the house monitors are checked, everyone says fine, they play a few more chords, they go out and they have dinner. Now, one of the things that I noticed that night when Bruce was doing, this was, I should say the afternoon, when Bruce was doing the Soundcheck, is there was something I would call very unique that was happening that night. You can see in this shot here, he's really directing the band. They would play a few numbers, they would go back, he'd say, do it again, start it again, point to different members, and you can just see the attention the band members had them. That was how Bruce basically, did his music at the time. One of the things I heard some of the band members say to me once was, when we worked with Bruce, it wasn't rehearsal, it was all business. Dave Sanchez was talking about really working up a sweat during some of the rehearsals. But they appreciated what he was doing so much, they knew something really good was happening. Anyway, I watched the work that night in Soundcheck, and I thought to myself, there is something special going on here, something unique. You know, I wasn't prepared for what I was about to see, but I knew that they had in mind, they had something very important to do that night. And Bruce, having been on the road, you know, for quite a long time, knew this was an important night. Now, some of you may know this, and we had this confirmed by some of the band members we spoke with. Even though the first two albums were successful from a critical point of view, from an album sales point of view, they were doing very poorly. Matter of fact, the record label, Columbia Records, was actually considering dropping them after the next label, after the next record. They were not making a lot of money on them, putting money into them. Actually, at the time, Billy Joel was on a bit of a rise. They were sort of putting more money into him. The band knew they had something to prove that night. So when the band was about to start, I remember thinking to myself, really excited about what was going to happen next. Now, it's interesting. We hear the word disruptor used a lot these days. Our ad agencies talk about being disruptive, campaigns being disruptive. I'm a great believer that the arts are the great disruptors. They have been the disruptor for years, and I think Bruce knew that as well, because when he opened up his first set that night, he opens the night up with New York City Serenade. And I'm thinking to myself, as David Sanchez starts to play that beautiful melodic, you know, symphonic feel at the beginning on the piano, I'm thinking to myself, this is a rock and roll show. What is he doing? But as I said, he knew exactly what he was doing. The lights went down, a single red light found Bruce on the stage, and he began by saying, "Meanwhile, in New York City." From that moment on, he had the audience in his hands. The house got quiet, they continued to play New York Serenade, and it just was a beautiful, beautiful moment. Now, one of the things that I often talk about, what I love about Bruce, I think we all agree, is his sense of performing. He really knew what it was like to have an onstage persona, which he created for himself, and really knew what it was like to be a performer all the time. Interesting, he did Springsteen on Broadway, but one of the things I always thought to myself years later is, he's kind of been on Broadway for a lot of years. He knows how important it is to be on a stage. This shot here is a perfect example of kind of what I mean. I call this one rock and roll future. The way he used the hat, the way he used his movement on stage, he really knew how to entertain people with his being. He really was a great performer. This shot here, I just like to show as well. It gives you an idea. I think this was during Spirit of the Night because he's using the harmonica to play the opening chorus to it. He had a way of sort of have antics prancing on stage. And as you can see, I was also shooting black and white and color at the same time. One of the other shots that I kind of like from the opening moments of the show was this shot here, which I'm not sure is in the book by itself, but it's to me, he's got this sort of look on himself where I think he's channeling Elvis. As we all know, he was a big fan of Elvis. Now, for those of you who have the book or have seen the book, I just want to draw your attention to something, because the photo is in the book as well. I'm going to show it to you right now. As you can see, there's what we've seen here on the left side. But on the left side, that's Garry Tallent. You know, the fact is, one of the things that's kind of fun about doing the book is taking certain photos and sort of, you know, cropping them or laying them out a certain way. I got to give a shout out to Jay Inman, our designer, who did an incredible job with the book. But I love the way these photos sort of played across the page here. Now, one of the things that's also was fun about Bruce that night that we know about Bruce now is he's a storyteller. His songs are full of characters. Some of them we've met, you know, in our own lives. Some of them are people that he's imagined for us, but he has an incredible way of entrancing us in his storytelling. And on that night, I remember he was telling stories in between every song. He talked about staying in a motel, Route 2 here in Massachusetts, in Concord, Mass, where basically when they checked into the hotel, they all went and grabbed for the keys, and he basically talks about how he walked into his room, the fluorescent light was flickering, the sheets were stained, there was a fly buzzing around the fluorescent light. It was something right out of a crime drama. He brought you into his world, even in between the songs. And then when he went into the songs, he told you stories. And he often would do small moments like this with his hat and small gestures. I call this one the storyteller, because that's what he is to me. He's an incredible storyteller. And again, that's one of the things that I love about his work, because I think arts and the artists are storytellers. We're all storytellers. When I do a photo, I hope my photo tells a story to you. I hope that, you know, when you see other people's work or see artists you don't know, you see something, you hear the story. That's one of the beautiful things about arts. Now, one of the great things about this project is we had a chance to talk to some of the individual members of the band, get their recollections. Here's a shot. It's one of my favorite shots actually from the night. This is Boone Cartman. Now you can see he's actually got his Asbury Park track shirt on as well. And when I showed the photo to him, he said, "Oh my God, that's my track shirt." Now it was interesting, when we talked to Boone about that night, a couple of stories he told us. Now I mentioned earlier about how the label was not really pushing the artists at the time, pushing their records. Boone told us about how when they were playing in Atlanta, he went into the record store to see how the record stores were going. They did not even have the records stocked in the store. Columbia was starting to actually pull that out of there and actually telling some of the DJs not to play the music as much. So again, they knew they had something to prove. They knew there was something up. And they also knew this was a special night, that something was possibly going to happen. When we talked with David Sanchez, one of the things that David talked to us about is interesting. When they were doing Soundcheck, and after Soundcheck, David stayed on the stage for a while and kept playing the piano. And I remember thinking to myself, this is interesting. And all of a sudden he started playing all this great jazz improvisation. I had no idea that he was quite fluent in being a jazz pianist, and that was actually a big love of his at this time. He was playing jazz prior to the E Street Band. Actually, he was playing jazz with Boone Carter and I believe with Garry Tallent as well. Anyway, David said to us, you know, I remember just thinking to myself, the time he spent with this piano was so unique. When we interviewed him, he said, "Well, what do you remember about that night, David?" He says, "I'll never forget the piano they rented for me. All along those days, we were getting small, junky pianos. They rented to me a beautiful, you know, full 3/4 grand piano that night." It was kind of interesting that I remembered the piano and he remembered it as well. Another artist that we had a great opportunity to talk to and spend some time with is Garry Tallent. You know, obviously still with the band now. Gary's a great guy, and by the way, if you haven't checked out his album releases, Break Time and More Like Me, I suggest that. He's a great writer on his own right. But one of the things that Garry told us that I thought was very fascinating that night is he said that he had tremendous fondness for the band and the makeup at the time. He said that having a band that was 50% African American, 50% white was very unusual during that time. And he said they really felt great that they were just doing it and not caring about what people thought. Now it's crazy to think that in the 70s that was still something going on, but it was. And Garry said about how they actually would play sometimes in the Deep South, and there could be a little nervousness about it, but they felt really good because this is who they were, this is what they're about. And it was interesting because when we talked to Garry about the evening, you know, one of the things that he's, you know, and about the review afterwards when Bruce was called Future of Rock and Roll, one of the things that he said to us was that was a lot to you know, basically live up to. You know, they all were concerned about that. Now, just a quick side note. If you have questions, and I know some of them are probably coming in via Instagram, we're making some notes of them. You know, if you have any questions at all, then I hope to get to them later on in your comments. But I just wanted to make that mention now. One of the other things that was interesting that night was Bruce premiered Born to Run. Now, I say that because I mentioned about how the band members knew something special was going to happen that night. They knew that Jon Landau was in the audience. Jon had met Bruce, you know, some months earlier, had talked to him a little bit about the production quality of his records, gave him a few thoughts on it. But anyway, and actually had reviewed the second album, The Wild, the Innocent, for Rolling Stone. He was in the audience that night. They knew somebody important was there, so they knew they had to do something good. Bruce decided to premiere Born to Run that night. Now remember, this is a good year before the song was actually ever released. Over that now. And what's interesting is that, here's the shot of Bruce doing Born to Run that night. And just a little note about this shot. He's a little bit blurry. Now, one of the things about this is during those days, we were shooting film. We weren't shooting digital, obviously, as we are now. So we were very limited on what we could work with. And sometimes because there wasn't a lot of lighting on the stage, this was not a big venue, it was actually a small theater. You know, we had to work with what we had. So if I had to have the shutter speed open a little slower than I'd like to get something on film, I did it. But I like the sense of motion that's in this in this image, the way he's sort of turning towards my direction, kind of in sort of an opposite direction from the band, kind of like, signaling them on to get going. Now, I bring that up because photographing with film, especially those days, was a very unique experience, especially in the concert and rock concert, environment. You had very little light to work with. So you had to be very selective about what you chose to shoot. You had 36 exposures in a roll, and you hoped to get maybe one good shot out of that, 2 if you were lucky. I'm very fortunate to have had that experience, and people that are photographing today, I would encourage people to shoot some film, because when you only have 36 exposures, you have to really concentrate on each shot and frame each one and think about it. I was fortunate to be able to go out and shoot some of the 2016 Rivet Tour, and when they were in Boston and I was photographing there, I was in the photographer's area standing next to the Boston Globe photographer. And we're just talking, and so when the band comes on and starts, all of a sudden I hear this sound going, and I realize it's a shutter just flying off, tons and tons of images. Later on, I read about this concept photojournalists have called spray and pray. He was literally firing off hundreds of shots, knowing that he'd probably get at least one good one. Granted, he's a good photographer, but that's what he was doing, spraying and praying. Interesting little piece of history there. This shot here is Bruce and Clarence. Again, it's from New York City Serenade, but I bring this up because I want people to see that I was, as I mentioned, I was shooting color as well. Now, one of the things that I love about this shot is I just love the way Bruce is looking off to the side, kind of in the moment, where Clarence is kind of by there, rock steady, supporting him, backing him up with that big saxophone, kind of saying in a way, I got your back, brother. Well, this is the shot I think a lot of you know. And I kind of hinted around about why this shot almost didn't happen. And I'm going to tell you a story, then we'll go back and talk a little bit about the shot. I had mentioned that I was very excited about seeing Bruce and the band again. And I had spent the afternoon in Soundcheck. I spent the whole first set shooting them. I was pretty much through most of the second set shooting them. And I said to myself, I'm going to take a break. I really just want to listen to the band, just enjoy myself. So I walk up on the stage, I sit in the drum kit, which is on the right side, which would be stage left, the right side is the audience faces. I'm sitting on the drum kit, and I'm just kind of like, settling down, put my cameras away. And as soon as I sit down, I see Boom Carter get up off his kit and walk over me, towards me. And I see Garry unplug his guitar and walk over towards me. And my reaction is, great. I finally take a moment to listen to the music, and they're done. And then all of a sudden I see Bruce come over and sit down on the piano, which is literally 3 feet in front of me. And I'm thinking to myself, what's going on here? So my first thought was, he's just sort of playing a few keys. The first thought was, I had no idea he played piano. My second thought was, I'm going to reload my camera. So I very cautiously load my camera because, again, I'm 3 feet away from him. The place is silent. And the sound of loading the camera and winding it up makes a sound, and I don't want to disturb this guy. So I was loading the camera really slowly, clicking one shot after another, looking through the frame, and saying to myself, this is pretty amazing. I have got myself a real wonderful moment going here. Now, one of the things I wanted to comment about was what I found that's unique about this shot is I was talking earlier about kind of the lack of light. Now, if you notice, the light on his face is coming clearly from the light on the piano. And the light behind him to the side is coming from one light to the side. So basically what's happening is we only have 2 lights illuminating the artist, one of them being a piano light. This is the environment we shot in. This is what we worked with. And luckily this is what contributed to the beauty of the shot. Now, as I mentioned, I did a whole roll of that. So it's kind of fun to sort of just hold up here the whole proof sheet and kind of show you all the images we did from that. And one of the things that was kind of fun from doing this is I had a chance when we published the book is to do something that I thought was a little special for the people. And we created a triptych where we put 3 of the images together to create this triptych here, which is was kind of fun to do. It's kind of showing the emotion of it, And we have actually produced these, in 2 sizes, and we've actually seen it as big as 6 feet long. And it really came out beautiful because each shot kind of stands on its own. It was fun that when we did the Kickstarter and we did what we called the stretch goals, we were able to raise enough money to basically add this feature to all our backers. We were very, very happy to do that. So, Bruce does the show, Jon Landau writes the review comes out in the real paper, and I'm actually kind of fortunate that I actually have just a copy of the review itself. The review is actually called Growing Young with Rock and Roll. You know? Now, one of the things we all know about this is when the review came out later, and that one line was in it, he says, you know, I've seen the future of rock and roll, and his name is Bruce Springsteen, that the record companies seized that line, rock and roll future, started doing it in all the promotions. So, Columbia Music finally felt they had something to work with. And next thing you know, these ads, these record promotions, quoting that line were everywhere. And suddenly, new life was breathed into the campaign to promote Bruce Springsteen, E Street Band. Bruce actually said in his autobiography that, and we all know that when the review first came out, and that came out, the band, as I said, Garry said, this is a lot to live up to. The band was a little uncomfortable with it. Bruce was especially uncomfortable with it. You've heard the stories about him going to England shortly after that and seeing that quote up in posters and tearing it down. Don't know if it's urban legend, but anyway, it does kind of reflect how the band felt about the review at the time. In his autobiography, Bruce happened to say, when reflecting back on it, some guy from Boston called me rock and roll future. Well, I guess if it was going to be somebody, it might as well have been me. So it's kind of neat to know that years later, Bruce was actually happy to recognize the fact that his now current manager, Jon Landau, wrote a review of him that basically helped, well, I wouldn't say cement his career, but helped give it some more breathing space, so things got moving. Of course, following that, they went in to do Born to Run. That album release was a big success, and things went pretty well after that. Now, I've been kind of fortunate that over the years, you know, I've continued to do work in music, continued to do photographs, and I was kind of lucky that, you know, in 2016, I was able to go back and photograph the band again on tour. So I just want to share a few shots from that. You know, this is from Madison Square Garden. It's a shot that I really love because, you know, it kind of like really shows. My producer's giving me direction on how to hold this. Excuse me. You know, this is a shot you know, during Rosalita, and if you saw them on that tour, you know that was just one bang of time during the night. This one here is from Boston Garden. And this last one here, kind of one of my favorites, is from the River Tour when they came to Gillette Stadium in Foxborough, Mass. The last night of the tour, which was just a great show. And the only other one I wanted to share with you is I was kind of lucky to spend some time when they were on the book tour. And when they came to Cambridge, I was over at the Harvard Square bookstore, which is kind of around the corner from where it all started, from the Harvard to Coop. And I took this shot of Bruce here when he was sort of just hanging around waiting to go sign autographs and meet people. You know, I wanted to kind of close this with just a kind of a quote from the review itself, and then if there's any questions, I'd be glad to take them and leave you with some thoughts. One of the things that I would recommend everybody, even though that one quote, you know, I saw rock and roll future, his name is Bruce Springsteen, is the one everybody remembers. I would encourage anybody to go online and find the full Jon Landau review. It's really a great read. It's really about the love of music, the love of rock and roll. He was at a point in his career where he had become, as a writer, kind of jaded with music. He actually wanted to get more into producing and had done some producing locally with Jay Giles and some other people. But he really loved music and he was kind of getting burned down on it. So this review is really a love letter to rock and roll, a love letter to what it does for him, what it does to all of us, and how it kind of like, you know, reignited his love. So in the review, he basically says at the end, I saw my rock and roll past flash before my eyes, and I saw something else. I saw rock and roll future, and its name is Bruce Springsteen. And on a night when I needed to feel young, he made me feel like I was hearing music for the very first time. I think whenever we see a concert, we see a great moment, we get that feeling. It's like we're seeing music and hearing music for the very first time. Well, thank you all for spending some time with us. I'm not sure if there's questions. There aren't any questions? Okay.
Well,
Is there any?
Who's your favorite son from Jeremy?
Who's my favorite son? Oh God, all of them, you know? But of course, the kids are the wise guys, but they're great to have there. I do want to just kind of close with one thing. I began by saying, obviously, we're living in really challenging times. You know, we all have friends that have been hit hard by the pandemic in different ways, especially job losses. And all of us that love music know that the musicians, the venues that support the music are really getting hit hard. And also the people that run the restaurants and do the foods that we love to eat, they're all being really hit hard. So you might have heard this before, but I wanted you to hear it from me. If there is an artist you love, and maybe you listen to their music when you're streaming it, buy the album, download it, buy it. Go to their site, buy the merchandise. If there's a restaurant you like to go to and you know, buy your food there, buy your goods there, take out food, buy a gift card, support them. You're getting those stimulus checks, spend some of your stimulus money on the arts. You know, I think we should start a movement here called Stimulus Arts. And we'll see what we do. And see if we can help all our brothers and sisters out there who are trying to make a go of it. Anyway, that's what I had to say. I want to thank you for joining us today. I hope we have a good rest of your weekend. I hope we all see you somewhere in a venue soon enough where we can rock out again. Thank you and goodbye.